December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Before sunrise, American sailors began another Sunday morning aboard ships of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. At 7:48 a.m., Japanese aircraft began attacking the harbor. More than 350 Japanese aircraft had been launched from 6 aircraft carriers positioned north of Hawaii. Their target was the American Pacific Fleet. The first waves struck ships, airfields, and military installations across Oahu. At Pearl Harbor, battleships became the main targets. The USS Arizona was hit by a massive explosion that tore through the forward part of the ship. The USS Oklahoma was struck repeatedly and eventually capsized. Other battleships were damaged, while American aircraft on nearby airfields were attacked before many pilots could get them into the air. The attack had been planned by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto and carried out by the Japanese Navy under Admiral Chuichi Nagumo. Japan wanted to weaken American naval power in the Pacific before expanding its military operations across Southeast Asia. Japanese leaders believed a devastating first strike could delay an American response and create time for Japan to secure territory and resources. What Japan did not know was how quickly the United States would recover. Within hours, the attack had spread beyond Pearl Harbor. Japanese aircraft struck targets across the island of Oahu, including military airfields. American forces were caught largely unprepared. Many aircraft were parked closely together on the ground, making them easier targets. Communications were confused, and the scale of the attack became clear only as reports arrived from different installations. The Japanese attack came in 2 major waves. The first began shortly before 8 a.m. The second followed later that morning. By the time the aircraft withdrew, the harbor and surrounding military facilities had suffered enormous damage. More than 2,400 Americans were killed and more than 1,000 others were wounded. 18 American ships were damaged or destroyed, although several were later repaired and returned to service. American aircraft losses were also severe. Japanese losses were much smaller. Dozens of Japanese aircraft were destroyed, along with several submarines and hundreds of personnel. But the strategic result was more complicated than the numbers suggested. The most important American aircraft carriers were not at Pearl Harbor when the attack occurred. The USS Enterprise was returning from Wake Island, while the USS Lexington was conducting another mission. Their survival would become strategically important because American carrier forces would soon become central to the Pacific War. The attack also failed to destroy several critical American facilities. Fuel storage tanks, repair facilities, submarine bases, and other infrastructure remained largely intact. This meant Pearl Harbor could recover faster than Japanese planners had expected. By the afternoon of December 7th, Americans across the country were learning what had happened. Radio broadcasts carried reports of the attack. Newspapers began preparing special editions. The question of whether America would enter the war was no longer theoretical. The following day, December 8th, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress. He described December 7th as a date that would remain associated with the attack and asked Congress to recognize a state of war between the United States and Japan. Congress approved the declaration with overwhelming support. America had entered World War II, but the consequences continued to expand. On December 11th, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. The conflict that had already consumed much of Europe and Asia had now become a direct war involving the United States against the Axis powers. Pearl Harbor transformed American society. Millions of Americans entered military service. Factories shifted toward wartime production. Automobile plants began producing military equipment. Shipyards expanded rapidly. Aircraft production increased on a scale that would eventually make American industrial capacity one of the decisive factors in the war. The United States also began mobilizing an enormous military force. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen were sent across the Pacific and eventually into Europe and North Africa. The country that had entered the war after a devastating surprise attack would soon become one of the largest military and industrial powers in the conflict. For Japan, the attack achieved its immediate objective of damaging the Pacific Fleet. But it did not eliminate American naval power. Instead, it brought the United States fully into the war and created a conflict Japan would ultimately be unable to win. Pearl Harbor therefore became more than a military attack. It became the moment that changed America's role in World War II. A quiet Sunday morning in Hawaii had ended with the United States committed to a global war.